1, 2, 3, let's go.
Wednesday afternoon, hoping you will tune into our show. It's
dead, but he left the suicide note. And I'd just like to read you that suicide note. But before I do, I tell you that 13 people were shot dead, he killed, and 33 were badly wounded. Let me ask you before I tell you what his suicide note, because he knew he'd be shot dead. It was death by cop, I suppose. What sentence would you give to him? I'll ask you first, Cuz. For what he did, what would your appropriate sentence be for him?
Well, it would be 13 accounts of first-degree murder, and however many accounts of attempted murder, I suppose. I may even put that on trial by insanity, but then that depends on the disclosure of the suicide note.
Yeah,
that would be.
So what would you say? Okay, there's the suicide note, but purely on the basis of all those murders and it clearly gone crazy. What would you give him, the death penalty if you believe in the death penalty, or would you say life in prison with no parole?
Do you know what? I suppose it depends, and I suppose this is a point that we're going to get to. I suppose it depends on his level of remorse. Now, for somebody who doesn't have remorse, then yeah, absolutely, death penalty. For somebody who has remorse, I think it's much more of a punishment to make them live with that remorse rather than just to execute them. So, yeah, I suppose it'd depend on how they portray themselves within the court setting as to whether I'd give them the death penalty or not. But certainly 13 accounts of murder would never be getting out of prison.
Yeah, no. Okay. What about you, Cuz?
Well, I'd base it on things that we've seen. So, for instance, somebody's tried to commit suicide and it's been stopped. They don't then go ahead to try to commit suicide again. Well, some of them don't. Most of them don't. Some of them do come to appreciate life afterwards. They think, you know what, I had a lucky escape there. You know, I don't know what went wrong. You know, I hit rock bottom, and you know, I just thought end it all, and that's why I got there. Right. So I would approach it from that perspective, and I would. Yeah, and I would, well, provided he's not being shot dead, because he might be trying to shoot at the police, and the police would definitely, you know, shoot back. It's the rule. So, for instance, if he was captured, if that were the case, I would, if I was the judge, I would recommend that he be put in an institution where he can get the help that he needs. Because I don't think there's any amount of punishment that would bring back 13 lives. I don't think any punishment would bring back one life anyway. I don't think it would suffice for the taking of one life, let alone 13 lives. And so on that angle, I would put him where he would get the needed help. Because I think it's unnatural for anyone to do such a thing, provided he isn't driven by some ideology. And I'm not going to go into that, but I suppose people can work out what it means. If he's not being driven by any ideology, then I would put him in in an institution where he can get the help that he needs.
Okay, that interested what you said though, that any punishment wouldn't bring back the lives, and that's often said, isn't it, in court in our country, that, you know, perhaps some people think someone isn't punished enough for a murder or for whatever a crime they've committed.
the leader of our gang will make the show go with a bang and fund the aim of everything customers. And fund the aim of everything customers.
In court in our country, that, you know, perhaps some people think someone isn't punished enough for a murder or for whatever a crime they've committed, and the judge or somebody will say, I know I can't pass any sentence that will bring back the person who's been killed. But does that mean there should be, from what you're saying, it sounds like you're saying there should be no punishment, only help and rehabilitation? Should he not be punished in some way for what he did, in your view?
I know people cry out for blood, you know, blood's been spilled or blood's been spilled. So let's spill his own blood. But at the end of the day, I don't see how. All right, so if somebody takes the life of somebody else, they're not hurting that person they've taken their lives. They're hurting probably hundreds of people that might have known that person, formed a bond with that person. You know, so, you know, those are the people that have been hurt. It's not actually the person that's died. Well, the person that's died, you know, he doesn't feel anything anymore. But then,
yeah, but he's lost his life. I mean, there's not much worse you could do to somebody than take their life, is there?
Yeah.
So he's not hurt him at all.
Well, but what do you feel when you're dead? This is the thing. Do you feel anything when you're dead? I've never been dead, so I can't really say for sure. But I'm just saying, you know, if somebody's dead, you know, there's no amount of crying, there's no amount of punishment that can bring him back to life. There's no amount of wailing that could bring that person back to life. So, you know, I would say, what you're punishing him for, get him the help that he needs. It's unnatural, like I said. It's unnatural for somebody to take somebody else's life. Yes.
I have to disagree. I think primitively it probably should be unnatural for people to take each other's lives. I mean, we see it happen also naturally nowadays in society. I mean, 12, 11, 10 years old, walking around with knives, taking people's lives. We see it all too often. I think as primitive beings, as primitive animals, we are instilled with the capability to kill, because that's how we hunt our prey, to eat it. But I think in a social aspect, I think nowadays it is all too easy for somebody to take somebody else's lives, and I don't even think they hesitate or blink while doing it. To be perfectly honest, that is my opinion. I think some people, like he said, no amount of punishment will ever bring back a loved one. I know this all too well. Of these past 2.5 years, I've lost 11 people through death. So no, like you said, no amount of crying, punishment, wailing, whatever, won't ever bring anybody back. But I also feel on the opposite side of that, especially in the case of
make the show go with a bang and fund the aim of everything cost us, and fund the aim of everything cost us.